Yes, all right. Well, good afternoon. I think still a good morning to anybody who's joining from the West Coast. So happy to be able to speak with all of you today. I'll be talking about disease concept models and describe the whys and the where of my process of disease concept model development for Kleefstra syndrome for this community. And if you were able to join a bit earlier, Terry Jo introduced you all to what is going on in the world of disease concept modeling in relation to rare disease and rare disease research groups. And I'm looking forward to expanding a bit on this and zooming in on Kleefstra syndrome. So before I dive on this, I want to introduce myself a little bit further. Thank you, Jeff, for the wonderful introduction. And my name is Kristen Connors, graduate student of genetic counseling at Boston University. I am also a leadership and education in neurodevelopmental and related disabilities fellow with the Boston Children's Hospital. And some of you may have interacted with genetic counselors before, but perhaps for some of you, it's a profession that sounds unfamiliar. There are a lot of different job descriptions that GCs, genetic counselors, hold, but often times the role looks like helping individuals and families understand what options they might have for genetic testing, if they might have a genetic condition, and supporting families through a diagnostic odyssey or as they learn about what a genetic condition is, how it's inherited, what this all means for their lives, or helping families getting the resources, clinical trial information, any referrals they might need. So it's a very broad profession that fills some of these gaps in care. And so with pursuing this career direction, I am really interested in how this professional role ties in with community advocacy, especially with rare disease community advocacy. And so that's, and again, as Jeff mentioned, watching a loved one's son grow up with Kleefstra syndrome type 2, these helped plant the seeds that led me to begin working with iDefine. So yes, this year I've joined as the patient outreach coordinator, and it's still a role I'm settling into, but I'm so excited to continue connecting with all of you through it. So as I began with saying, the reason that I'm speaking with you all today is to talk about disease concept models and the work that I'm doing to develop a disease concept model for the Kleefstra syndrome community in collaboration with iDefine and the Boston Children's Hospital. I have the wonderful mentorship of 3 genetic counselors, as well as from Eric and Jeff and others in the development of this project. So what is a disease concept model, or a DCM, as it's often abbreviated? Even before today, some of you may have been familiar with this term from the iDefine newsletter. In short, it is a very in-depth description of a genetic condition that uses the perspectives of affected individuals or their caregivers to shed light on how the condition is going to impact daily life. And we can start to generate these descriptions by interviewing either individuals with the condition or their caregivers, especially in situations where somebody may be nonverbal, asking questions about all the different aspects of these families' daily lives. And then from all of that rich storytelling that we get from these interviews, we can figure out how to best represent all of what we learn from the community. This includes things like seeing how often a symptom is brought up by different people and what challenges in daily life it brings. It might lead us to see that certain symptoms are more prevalent to folks during certain years of life because of how symptoms interact with what a school day looks like, or what language what developmental changes someone is going through. But of course, why do DCMs matter when rare conditions like Kleefstra syndrome are very well studied and we know exactly what the symptoms are? DCMs are so impactful because they amplify the voices of rare disease communities. It's easy to find lists of symptoms that people with a rare genetic condition might have, but it's an entirely separate thing to get a real in-depth understanding of how this impacts what families experience and what needs they have. So DCM is scientific research that can be used to show the values of a rare disease community You can show this to a pharmaceutical company so that they know what endpoints, what goals for treatment might make a meaningful difference, what that would look like. And there is a lot of momentum towards clinical trials for treatments for rare diseases, much of it bolstered by the Orphan Drug Act. However, pharmaceutical companies sometimes develop interventions that don't actually have an impact on what the community cares about, what's most salient to them. So there are systematic assessments of disease drug trials that have found that sometimes numerous or even the majority of results for specific disease treatments, including cardiovascular disorders and dementia, they don't actually end up acknowledging outcomes that are really most valuable to affected individuals and their families. And patients often report treatment outcomes to be of little value to them. And with rare disease communities, there is even less information to build meaningful clinical endpoints. So a DCM shows pharmaceutical companies or any treatment developers that this is what the community experiences. This is exactly what they value and what challenges they want to see addressed. A company can then know that before they get started, that if they were to develop a treatment, that the community would be very eager to use it. We have this proof. DCMs can additionally be used to show what educational materials, what kinds of social support, what other interventions the community wants. So DCMs are very much on the rise. They're gaining a lot of traction and notability. According to the NIH, there are over 7,000 rare diseases, and that means there is a huge number of communities that really need to have representation in the literature, and representation that isn't just based off of what healthcare professionals see and hear, but also what families experience and have to say. So notable DCMs of rare diseases include those developed on STXBP1 related disorders, Angelman syndrome, Dravet syndrome, and there are many, many more being worked on each year, actually this year. And I want to zoom in on one example of a DCM developed for Angelman syndrome back in 2021, just to give you a more concrete sense of the whys behind constructing a DCM. And so Angelman syndrome is a neurodevelopmental disorder estimated to impact between 1 in 10,000 and 1 in 20,000 people. And it has some overlap with Kleefstra syndrome, like an increased chance of having seizures and developmental delays. And then this is a visual of the development of their conceptual model. It starts by looking at what literature already tells us about Angelman syndrome, how it affects patients and caregivers, and it uses it to make that initial concept model. And then clinicians with expertise in Angelman syndrome are interviewed, and caregivers of individuals with Angelman syndrome are interviewed as well. And this allows for a really thorough look at the breadth of experiences that people have. And we get a multitude of descriptions of the social, the emotional, the physical, the psychological impacts of Angelman syndrome. And then from this, a final conceptual model can be constructed, and it showcases the impact of signs and symptoms of Angelman syndrome, as well as the impact of treatments that are currently available. And every DCM looks very unique, often very different based on how information can best be represented. To give just one example of impact, the Angelman syndrome DCM was able to identify some of the features of significant concern for caregivers that other studies have shown clinicians don't rank as highly of concern. And this is very likely because they aren't as distinctive features from other conditions. But they are, of course, very important, and this in turn makes a really strong case for clinical trial endpoints that focus on concerns that could have otherwise been missed. And so overall in this study, caregivers named expressive communication, sleep, and seizures as what would be the most important targets for future treatments to improve their quality of life. And this information is well represented, well reflected in the DCM. And the paper has already been used to establish the need for ASO therapy, an antisense oligonucleotide therapy, a type of therapy that targets the production of a specific protein. In this case, it focuses on increasing protein production that's reduced in people with Angelman syndrome due to a genetic change. And this protein has been correlated with reducing sleep disturbances when it's present in proper amounts. And the researchers saw that improving sleep from the study was an important target for families. So the work of this paper is already very much seen, and this is just one example of impact. And then this is a visual that Terry Jo also went over in her presentation. And I wanted to highlight again that different DCMs look very different and might collect different types of data as well from interviews. As Terry Jo mentioned, the presentation really shows not only symptoms mentioned and their presence through the lifespan, but also what impacts those symptoms have on different parts of a person's affected life, or an affected person's life, and on their caregivers throughout the years. This is really powerful data, and this is an example from the STX-BP1 DCM. So going back to the Kleefstra syndrome community, I wanted to let you know where I am currently in the process of this DCM project. And it's more or less in the transition window between steps 2 and 3. Beginning back very early last winter, I was first connected with iDefine and began speaking with Jeff and Eric, as well as some fantastic folks from the Boston Children's Hospital Kleefstra Syndrome Clinic, about their visions of what this could be. I then started on a little journey of diving into the literature to learn everything about what we know currently of KS symptoms, how they impact families, and just generally gaining an understanding of what DCMs are myself. And then we began building out what this study would look like, taking into account some of the various ways other researchers have gone about collecting and organizing information from their communities, and then figuring out what will be most efficient, most impactful given our available timeline, resources, network, and what makes KS unique. And an interview guide has been constructed for caregivers, as well as another one for clinicians. These interview guides act as menus in which, when I talk to a caregiver, I have a set of open-ended questions to ask and ways to let the caregiver really lead the dialogue with what they want to say, while covering the breadth of things that we need to, and making information somewhat comparable across interviews. And a little over 2 months ago, I believe, I submitted for approval for the study by my institutional review board, and I've then made first revisions with them. And I am waiting to hear back. Once I get the go-ahead, I can start to recruit participants. And I plan to begin these interviews late this fall into early winter. Once all of the interviews are done, I'll be able to start to analyze the data, which I intend to do then over the winter, and construct a final conceptual model for Kleefstra syndrome. I should have a completed DCM come about April 2024, which is very necessary for me to graduate, but also a helpful guide for my timing of this workflow. I am still very much in the process of learning how to do meaningful and efficacious research, and I very much hope to graduate with both the foundations of that and with this project. So for the design of this study, roughly 15 to 20 caregivers will be selected for interviews. And I want to be very intentional about selecting a group that represents diverse backgrounds. So this is a purposive sampling of those who fill out our interest survey. And I want to capture a variety of patient and caregiver ages and genders, especially being sure to get a proportional number of KS kids over the age of, sorry, one moment, just looking at the chat. Especially being sure to get a proportional number of KS kids over the age of 13 to capture some of the symptoms like regression that we start seeing in the teen years. I want to capture socioeconomic status and geographic location, lots of different factors that might impact experiences, resources. And I have here just a snippet of some of the questions and topics that I'll go over with a caregiver, general questions, and then potential additional prompts to dig deeper if needed. I will also be interviewing between 2 and 3 healthcare professionals who have expertise in KS. At the end of this process, we intend very much to publish a DCM for Kleefstra syndrome in an academic journal. We're also partnering with Combined Brain, as Terry Jo mentioned, which supports research that moves towards clinical treatments for many rare genetic neurodevelopmental conditions. There are, again, as Terry Jo mentioned, other DCM teams, many with lead researchers who are genetic counseling students like myself, that are also along similar timelines right now. And we are able to communicate together through challenges that we encounter through this process. We can collaborate on things like standardizing how we code interviews. In addition to everyone developing independent DCMs, we can also develop that merged DCM that can highlight issues such as common areas of need and gaps in treatment targets across neurodevelopmental conditions. And so our hope is that this collaboration gives us the best of both worlds, an ability to independently focus on what does the most justice to representing the Kleefstra syndrome community, and then collectively connecting efforts across neurodevelopmental conditions. I'll pause quickly. I do see a question from David Henderson. Is the lit review available now? It is not currently available. However, if you interview me, I would be, or not interview, sorry. If you email me, I would be happy to share that information with you. I'll include my email at the end of this, but it's not publicly available yet. So I am very much excited to share the DCM with all of you once it is complete, and I really hope that it can make a difference in the lives of families. DCMs can also be expanded on over time. So if this study fails to capture a certain demographic, or if in the future treatments become more available for one aspect of the condition, further DCM research can be done in the future that expands, that adds. So thank you all so much for your time, and I want to open up the floor to any other questions you might have or feedback and thoughts.
Listen, I'll start. I think, it's something I picked up on here, which I love the approach, is around the diversity of this effort. I think that there's a whole bunch to cover. We've done natural history studies that have been focused on a segment of the population, and I understand the reasons why. Sometimes there's just so much robustness to cover, and as it relates to regression, we certainly want to, zoom in a little bit. But as we're talking about the disease concept model, and as we've discussed previously with Kleefstra syndrome doesn't know age, doesn't know gender, doesn't know ethnicity, right? And so there's a massive challenge, and it goes way beyond the Kleefstra community with, understanding how to improve accessibility and how to create a more inclusive environment in the rare disease community. Because with a condition like ours, that should have, what you would see as far as breakdowns and demographics, we don't see that, right? And that's a massive challenge. And we got to make sure that what we do know does have equal representation as much as possible. So I love that that's a focus, and I hope that everybody listening or watching the recording will reach out and consider that, because we don't want all singular gender of same age, same ethnicity. That doesn't give an accurate picture, an accurate a snapshot. And so as we look at deletions, mutations, ethnicity, genders, there is a wide swath that we want to cover, and we want to make sure that this DCM is well represented of that. And I love the fact that we can continuously update it. So um, let's see other things here. Terry Joe being an amazing resource, as always, offering to help assist. It's just fantastic to have her as a resource. So really awesome presentation. Obviously, Eric and I are incredibly excited about this. I love that the timeline of the DCM almost is running in parallel with the guideline initiative as well. It continues to show how much work there is to do, how much work is ongoing. It feels like we're gaining some real traction and momentum as a community, and I think we're positioning ourselves very well to start reaping some benefits that actually translate to better care, right? Stronger community, and hopefully a targeted treatment at the end of the day. So if there are no other questions, then I think what I would like to wrap with today is three things. I think it's always good to kind of digest and push three things out there. And I think there's three ways that we could all be contributing right now. And I think number one is what we led off with today. It's Citizen. It's making sure that we get as many people in Citizen as possible. That link is already in the chat. Number two would be this biorepository roadshow. And I will just copy and paste a couple of dates and locations of what's coming up in the chat. So there's that. Again, reach out to us at unlock@idefine.org. We'll get you in with the combined brain team. We'll understand where we can meet you. If you're not able to go to the actual conference, do you live within an hour, or do we need to take additional steps? Again, we want to meet you with where you are. And the last thing is kind of in relation to this disease concept model. Kristen, we referenced her patient outreach coordinator position with iDefine. And one thing that we're really focused on is our worldwide map. And so if you have not yet registered for the worldwide map, we need you to. I don't know that I did a great job yesterday or today describing the importance, or you heard Terry Joe hit on us receiving the ICD 10 designation code. And part of a great deal of that has to do with the response of the community or participating in the map, so that we can show that there's a huge unmet need in the country. Right? They want to see 1 in a million as a prevalence, and we're not quite there, but we're pretty darn close. And we can definitely believe there's plenty out there undiagnosed. But it would be great to have contact or firm figures to be able to share and show that we know where these people are. When there's opportunities like the Biorepository Roadshow, what we want to leverage the map to do is for Kristen and or I to reach out and say, okay, we have an opportunity in Los Angeles coming up. Hey, everybody, within a X amount or, who's in this proximity, just making sure you're aware. Or can we set up, can we engage the community in a way where we're creating these informal meetups? The power of connection, the in-person connection for families is important. Just communicating with someone earlier who was talking about 5-6 families in their area. I know there's a contingent in Michigan that gets together regularly. That's powerful. That that enabling community to come together. And so if you sign up for the map, we can know where you are. We can introduce you to other people in your area, resources that are available. It's a very important tool that we're continuously kind of unpacking right now, and Kristen's a big part of that. So plus you'll just be able to engage with her one-on-one, which has been fantastic with us so far, and we're excited about the DCM. So fantastic work by everybody today for the presentations. We are coming in right at 2 o'clock again, so very punctual. So appreciate everybody's efforts there. And we will see everybody tomorrow again for the final day. We have some updates from the Kleefstra Clinic. Dr. Sid, you'll hear from Zoe, Kimberly Wiltrout, as well as Hans from Radboud. We have Igor Ulitsky from the Weitzman Institute, who's going to be giving some updates on some ASO work. So it should be a wonderful way to close out these 3 days. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your time, your energy, and Kristen, thank you very much. Take care, everybody.